Hello, in this video I'm going to be reviewing Girls Nite Out, also known as the Scaremaker, directed by Robert Dubell. Got this copy here. I don't think it's ever actually been officially released on DVD as far as I know. It's only this version that you see here, which I think I'm correct in saying is a made-on-demand type release. I could be wrong, but it's only officially been released on VHS as the Scaremaker, its original title. At least here in the UK you can get it on VHS. I'm not sure if it's available in other countries, but certainly here you can get it as the Scaremaker on VHS. But as far as DVDs and Blu-rays, I don't think there's anything official, just this one that you see here, which, like I say, I think might be made on demand. That's the cover art anyway, and the spine, and that's the back of the packaging, and there are no extras, at least on this one that I've got here, so no special features to speak of. So this film runs about 96 minutes approximately, and it was, I think, initially released in 1982, had a very limited release, maybe as the Scaremaker under that title, but I think it properly came out as a re-release under the Girls Nite Out name that you now see here, a year or two later in sort of 1983, possibly 1984, so a bit of a strange staggered release for it. Let's get into the story for this one now, and it's set in a small Ohio town, and we start out at the local sanitarium where a patient is found dead in his room. Soon after, we learn that the deceased had been committed to the asylum for carrying out a brutal murder a year or so prior of a local co-ed during a college scavenger hunt type event. On the anniversary of this crime, the patient, perhaps consumed by guilt, had committed suicide and hung himself in his cell. Later, however, as two grave diggers attempt to bury the body, the corpse is snatched and the two diggers killed by a mostly unseen assailant. Meanwhile, at the local community college, at the local college, not community college, I don't know where I got that from. At the local college, the students are preparing to celebrate a big basketball game victory with another scavenger hunt type event, so it's sort of a similar thing to what happened when the girl was killed a year or two before. Same type of event going on. And those participating in this scavenger hunt find themselves preyed upon by the body-snatching lunatic who stole the corpse from the gravediggers earlier on. Now clad in the basketball school mascot outfit of a bear suit, the killer has the perfect method for moving around incognito on campus while carrying out their grisly work. So that's the story to it, the premise. And they're going to go into what I liked about it, what I thought were the good points. And the aforementioned comical bear suit, the costume for the killer, is a neat disguise and a good addition to the film. I really do like it. I know some people perhaps think it's a bit too silly and they can't take it seriously, but for me, I liked it and it worked. And not only did it make a good, interesting visual, something a bit different, a bit provocative maybe, it also enabled the killer to get around campus without arousing suspicion, so it was good in that sense as well, kind of had a dual purpose of being unique to look at and a way of getting around without being sort of questioned by the students and the security and whatnot. At the time as well, it was quite a unique concept for this kind of costume. I know since it's gone on to inspire other films like perhaps Varsity Blood, Cheerleader Camp to the Death, Pandemonium, not the 80s Pandemonium but the more recent one from the last few years. So it's gone on to impress some other filmmakers in more recent times to kind of copy the idea and use these animal kind of mascot type costumes as their guise for the killer. I also like how the weapon of choice here, which is a pre-Freddy Krueger style kind of gloved hand thing with knives for fingers, is kind of he's sort of gelled in with the costume of the bear suit here to form a sort of a bear claw of kinds. Of a sort, so the weapon kind of ties in nicely with the costume, and the killer uses it like a bear claw, wielding it from their own hand like a set of claws. So that's nicely meshed in there with the costume. Sticking with the subject of the killer, I also like the creepy voice that the killer uses at various points. Firstly, just to insult the victims. Most of the victims are female, and as he kills them, or as the perpetrator kills them, they insult the girls and call them various names, but their voice is quite creepy and adds a kind of a sleazy undertone to it. And later on, the killer also calls into the local radio show and kind of makes update calls on what they're doing to try and creep out the host, and again the voice is pretty strange, and it adds a little certain element to the film. Okay, the next good point that I've got separate from that is that the soundtrack is memorable. A variety of well-known pop songs from the era appearing in the first half or so of the film. Whether it's just party music or tunes picked out by the aforementioned radio DJ to play over the wireless. I don't have a great knowledge of music from that time, but if you're someone that does appreciate music from this kind of vintage era, then you probably have a fun time picking out some of the songs. But even with my limited knowledge, I was able to recognise a couple of them, so I think you'll probably have fun doing that if you're a fan of that style of music. Next good point is that general opinion is that the film ends on quite a strong note, and I'd have to go along with that, and I agree that I also like the ending, as in that the reveal of the murderer is a genuine surprise. The closing shot is also somewhat disturbing. It's been likened by some to the ending of Sleepaway Camp, and it's not quite as good as that, but it's certainly in the ballpark. I can see why it draws the comparisons. So yeah, really good ending to it. It does end certainly on a strong note, but on a slightly more negative tone for me. It wasn't completely positive, because it does end rather abruptly, and it doesn't tie up the fate of 2 or 3 characters that are also involved with the scene with the killer towards the end. We don't really know exactly what happens to them, so it does leave a few sort of strings untied there, which I would have liked to have had cleared up. And for me, although the ending is a surprise, a genuine surprise, as in who the killer is, for me the best worked reveals in this sense. If it's like a mystery type thriller, a mystery type whodunit style slasher, I should say. I don't know where I got thriller from. But yeah, if it's that type of slasher film, I'd prefer it when there's kind of like subtle clues as to who the killer might be that perhaps you missed on the first viewing, but if you go back and rewatch it, you can pick out these things and think, oh, there were some subtle nods here and there that I just missed first time round. But with this one, that's not really the case. There are no clues really as to who it is, so it's a little bit of a cheat in that sense, but still good though, and certainly a strong end to it, more so than a bad end. So I am going to throw my hat into the ring and agree with people that say they like the ending. One thing that was cool towards the end as well is that they're going a little bit of a different direction, and the killings are discovered by the campus security and the police officers, and they start questioning some of the local male students as to who they think could be behind it all. So that's kind of got like a police interrogation angle towards the end, and that's quite entertaining to watch. So I like that aspect of things towards the end as well. Moving on to the bad points now, the things that I didn't like, and the kills I would say are somewhat disappointing, as they all involve the admittedly good claw weapon that I said I liked previously, and I do like it, but it does get a bit repetitious because they're all very, very similar. They're all using this claw, and some of them are even off camera, so you don't even get to properly see what happens to the victims. So I didn't like that. They're all a bit samey. You don't see very much. It's just usually just the you'll see sort of the bear's hand go to a victim's throat, but you won't actually see any proper gore really. So it's a bit tame in that regard as well. To be fair, they do throw around a lot of blood, but there's not much in the way of practical effects or anything like that, so a bit disappointing in that regard. Next bad point is that the film is a bit of a chaotic and muddled structure when it comes to the cast of students that make up the lion's share of the characters. And the trouble is that there isn't a focus really on one of them or 2 of them or just a small group. It's sort of, the focus is split across a whole bunch of people really, and it feels a bit too, like they're spreading themselves too thin. There's this guy, for example, near the beginning, one of the stars of the basketball team. I think he's nicknamed Monster, and the way it was being built up in the very early stages, I thought that he was going to be the main character, or at least one of the main characters, maybe the final boy, but as the film goes on, he just kind of drifts out of it and completely disappears, and then crops up towards the end very briefly, but he just disappears for the middle part of the film. And that's kind of reminiscent of what's going on. It's very sort of sketchy in this regard. There's no clear focus, there's no final boy or final girl to speak of really, and it feels a bit muddled, and it loses something because of that. I think that it would have gained if they'd gone with a more traditional structure. This wouldn't be a massive problem if the characters that we do get were really likeable, but unfortunately they're not. For the most part, they're kind of unlikable, if anything. There's a lot of lying going on, a lot of dishonesty and cheating, that kind of thing. Not people sort of cheating on their partners and whatnot. So that leaves a bit of an unsavoury taste as well. So the characters aren't even very likeable. So that's probably the biggest negative to it, and just let it down somewhat. Another bad point that I've got, and this is more towards the fact that it doesn't have a proper Blu-ray release or proper DVD release perhaps, is that the audio quality isn't very good, at least on this made on demand type release that I think it's made on demand, I'm not really sure, but this disc here anyway, for me at least, it wasn't the greatest when it came to the audio. I missed a lot of what was going on sometimes. Well, not a lot, but I missed the odd bit here and there. Perhaps the odd key bit I felt here and there that I couldn't quite hear. And towards the end as well, the picture quality seemed to drop out somewhat, and it became a bit broken up, the picture, and I couldn't make out completely fluidly what was going on. It didn't happen for long. It was probably only about 2 minutes in total, but yeah, the picture quality isn't great. Maybe I've just got a defective disc. I don't know if it's just my copy, but I did find the picture quality dropped out a little bit towards the end for a few minutes. And one last thing that I've got that I wasn't sure about, but I'm going to throw in as a bad point, is that fairly early on there is a point of view scene from the killer where the killer is kind of breaking into a school office, and they're rifling through the records in a filing cabinet and picking some things out, but it's not. I wasn't really sure what was going on here. It's not explained later either as the film goes on, so I wasn't sure what the killer was getting at there, or what they were trying to achieve by doing that. That's only a small nitpick, but something that I noticed and I thought I'd mention. So overall then, the verdict now, going into my final opinion, and after initially watching this a couple of years back, I wasn't very impressed with it. I didn't really like it much. I thought it was quite forgettable, but I recently, in the last few days, gave it a rewatch, and I'm pleased that I did, because I liked it a lot more second time round. It is hindered by the lack of a central character, a proper final girl or final boy, like I said, and the killings are a bit disappointing and tame, but what it does have is a really cool looking killer, unique costume, some nice songs, the soundtrack's good, and it also just makes use of a lot of the traditional slasher tropes that are thrown in here to good effect. So if you're a slasher fan, as I'm sure you perhaps are, if you're watching this video, there's a lot to kind of cater towards your likes in that regard. They throw in quite a lot of the traditional tropes that we like to see. So overall, I'm going to give it out of 10 a 7, so a pretty strong score. It wouldn't have been that high if I'd have done the review after watching it the first time, because like I said, I didn't really like it that much on first viewing, but on the second watch it was much better for me. I enjoyed it much more, so I'm going to go with a 7 out of 10. So not too bad, pretty good. Recommended it. I would recommend it, sorry. And I'll put a body count, by the way, or kill count in the description, so feel free to check that out. Alright, thanks for watching, goodbye.